Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at eTrailer, and today we're taking a look at installing the Roadmaster Diode Wiring Kit on a 2018 Ford Explorer. Now this is going to be available in a few different configurations. The one we installed today has 4-pole ends, and it also comes with a 4-pole to 4-pole jumper, but you can also get it without any 4-pole ends on it, and you can also pick it up with an umbilical. So if your tow bar doesn't have one, an umbilical is something that you're going to need, and there's 3 different styles that you can pick up for that. There's a straight cable, a coiled cable, as well as a hybrid cable. Now, there's 5 main components when flat towing your Explorer that are going to be required. Now the first one is going to be the base plate, which is going to attach to the frame of the vehicle, creating a nice structural support for your tow bar to be able to connect from your base plate to the hitch on the RV. Now going along with that, we have our safety chains, and that's it, just in case of an accidental disconnect. It's still going to keep everything attached, and the mounting points are already on the base plate for you. You also have your diode wiring, which is going to transmit light signals from the RV to the taillights on the towed vehicle, and that's just a 6-pole up front that runs to the 7-pole on the RV. You also have a supplemental braking system, which is going to slow and stop the vehicle as you apply the brakes on the RV. And in case of a catastrophic disconnect where everything failed, you have a breakaway switch, which when pulled, the vehicle will come to a stop. Diode wiring is something that you're seeing more and more on flat-towed vehicles. If you've ever seen the magnetic lights that stick on the vehicles, it's kind of an old-fashioned way to do it, but the diodes really recreate the same thing, giving the light sequence of your brake lights, running lights, and turn signals, and that way people behind you can tell what you're doing. But having diode wiring is really nice because it splices into your factory wiring, and that way it illuminates on the taillights of the vehicle, so you don't have to store those magnetic lights. There is a little bit of splicing in, but overall this is a pretty easy thing to do, and a lot of your braking systems will actually require tying into the diode wiring. So that's something you're going to want to look at when choosing braking systems. It also changes the installation slightly, but overall it's pretty easy to do, and I'm going to walk you through each step to make sure you get yours installed on your Explorer. To begin our installation, we're going to grab our spool of wire. Now ours has a 4-pole end attached to it. You can get this without the 4-pole and just kind of bare wires. We will be tying this into a 6-pole eventually, so really it's not completely necessary, but it's up to you what kind of end you want. If you are doing something like a charge line, I also recommend having that routed up to your battery, because when we tie into 6-pole, we'll be doing it at the same time. Now take your wiring and get it close to your 6-pole mounting point. Give yourself a little bit of extra room. That way when you're tying those wires in, it's not going to be too tight. And from here, we just start routing it back to our taillights. But if you have a braking system that requires diode wiring, you're going to want to pull a decent loop up into the engine bay. It's going to make it a lot easier to splice in. So like your stay and play duo is a braking system that you do need to tie into that. So what you do is just route this up in the engine bay. I would make maybe about a foot loop, tape that up, and then run it back down through the engine bay and eventually under the vehicle. We're using a portable braking system, so we didn't have to do that. So I simply just routed this through here, and I'll raise up the vehicle and show you the rest of the path. So when running the wires, you want to make sure that you're staying away from any moving parts or anything that's hot that can damage the wires, and also any sharp edges that might chafe them long term. So I went ahead and just kind of followed our frame rail and zip tied it up. There's some holes along the frame that you can use to kind of keep that away from the engine, your axles, and also right here I went underneath the steering rack. There's a sway bar up there, so I just kind of made sure to keep that tight, and then made my way back to our body mount. And from here, you can run this through the channeling. We do have a 4-pole end that's attached to the end of our wiring. We're going to be cutting that off because we'll be tying it into our diodes. And while we're cutting this off, we also want to split our white wire and peel that back. We're going to create a chassis ground, but the more that we save as far as wiring goes, we can utilize that extra spare wire to become a jumper wire later for our running lights. So I'll cut our end off. And then I'm going to take the white wire, and really when it comes to a chassis ground, you can look for a factory one. Sometimes you can find them. If not, there's a self-tapping screw included and a ring terminal, so we can drill that into the frame. So I'm just going to go ahead, peel this back, and make my ground pretty early on. That way we have plenty of extra wire. So peeling my wire back, I'll go ahead and cut off this and hold on to that extra bit. We're then going to strip back just a small portion here of our wire. And then we're going to crimp down our ring terminal And throughout the process, anytime you are crimping something down, even when it comes to our diodes, you're always going to want to give it a quick tug to make sure that it's secure. Sometimes, you know, you can crimp it down and think you have it, and then it slides out, and you don't want to have to go back and chase any wires and find any grounds or wiring that's faulty. So just make sure that it's nice and secure. And with that attached, I'm going to take my self-tapping screw and just kind of drill it into the frame here. And if you need that self-tapper to go in a little bit easier, you can drill a small pilot hole. Now when tightening this down, you don't have to get too crazy. You just want the ring terminals nice and snug. Now don't go too tight, it'll round off. That self-tapper and all those threads you made will be damaged. So just kind of make sure that your ring terminal is not going to spin around. And with that in place, I'm going to continue to run our wires back towards our taillights. So I continued running my wires through this channeling and made my way back. And when I got to the fuel tank, I kind of wrapped along the side here and then made my way to the rear cross member. I kind of did the same with the green, just routed that over the rear cross member, followed kind of the same path to make sure it's not going to hit the exhaust. And that extra white wire that we pulled off, I'm using this as a jumper because as we run our running lights up to the driver's side, we do need to jumper it over to the passenger. So I just pre-routed this using the hitch area. Again, just kind of avoiding the exhaust tips there to make sure you have a little bit of length on each side. So at this point, I'm going to lower the vehicle down and we'll get our taillights taken out. Now to remove our taillights, there's two plastic push pins here. There's no real slot to kind of pry that out, so I'm using just a small pick to get these removed. And that's going to give us access to the 8mm screws that are holding this in, so we'll go ahead and get those removed. And there's normally alignment tabs on taillights that kind of pry in. Sometimes they can kind of get stuck. So wobble your taillight a little bit, that should knock it loose. And that's going to give us access to our wires here. So I'm going to it's got a little keeper here, just undo that. And then we have all three of them here. So I can unplug this, I could take these out, but honestly, if we just kind of rest our taillight, I'll be able to gain access to these wires. But we do need to kind of cut back the insulation here to tie into it. So you can sometimes peel it with your nail and just kind of pull this back to gain access, or you can use a knife blade or something along those lines. Just be sure that you're not cutting any of the wires. I think that should be enough. And a lot of times just getting space for the diodes to be able to have room once we put the taillight back in is important. So doing it back here I think makes a little more sense. This should be enough wire peeled back. Now normally you go through with a tester and run through the light sequence to figure out which wires we'll be tapping into, but on this one I've gone ahead and done that for you. The ones that we're going to be using are going to be the brown and the yellow, so we'll just kind of keep these separated from here, and at this point we can go ahead and cut these wires. Now we'll just strip back both ends on both wires here. Now grab diodes from the kit. We're going to be pulling off these spade connectors to put them on the factory wiring, so we need 4 of them. Just go ahead and remove these and one more from the other. And these wires are fairly small, so again, this is a good time every time you crimp it to double check to make sure that that connection's nice and tight. And then we'll just put spade connectors on the remaining 3. So now we can make our first connections here. So you'll see that there's an out arrow and an in. The out is going to go towards the plug that's on the taillight, so you can go ahead and plug these in. And then take that same corresponding wire, and you can plug it into either one, does not matter, but just make sure that the yellow's on the yellow diode and the brown's on the brown. And then at this point, we need to pull up our wires that we ran back here. And it can get a little bit tricky sometimes to pull them up. We use an airline tube to fish wire this. If you need to, you can use a string with a nut and just kind of drop that down like a plumb bob and tape those wires and pull it up. So we do have quite a bit of extra wire. I'm just going to make sure that I have more than enough to pull up and then cut off the excess. And we're going to be running our brown, our yellow, and our white jumper wire up. It's pretty tight here, so just kind of take your time and kind of bounce this around. If you need to, you can help feed it from underneath, but you want to make sure that these don't come loose as you're pulling it up, otherwise you're going to have to re-fish wire it. And then with these pulled up, I still have quite a bit of extra wire, so I'll cut this back. And we'll separate our brown and yellow and strip back all these ends. So we're going to first focus on our brown and white, and this is going to our running light, which ironically is the yellow wire here. But we need to jump these together, so with this you can actually strip it back a little bit further, enough to twist these together. And then you're going to take the yellow spade terminal, which is a larger gauge. It's going to allow for those wires to fit in there. We'll crimp this down. And then this one is going to plug into the factory yellow wires here. And then on our yellow, we'll just put a blue spade terminal and connect that to our factory brown wire. So with these all connected, we do want to make sure that these have room for the taillight to go back in. They have double-sided tape, so you can kind of stick it along a spot that you're going to have clearance. You can also kind of feed it down in the pocket. But before doing that, something that I always do is take some electrical tape and wrap it around the whole thing just to kind of keep any tension from pulling those wires out long term. It's also going to kind of give it a little bit of waterproofing. So I'll go ahead and get that taped up and get our taillight put back in. Now at this point, we're pretty much going to repeat on the other side. So I'll get my taillight taken out, those wires stripped back, and then I'm going to be pulling up our green wire and our white wire and making those connections. Now on this side, it's also yellow and brown. So since our yellow is our running light, this is going to have our jumper white wire, and we're going to attach that. And then our stop and turn is going to be our brown, so our green will attach to this. And we officially have our diodes all hooked up here. So I'll get this taped up, get our taillight put back in, and then we're going to head to the front where we're going to attach it to a 6-pole. Now at the front of our vehicle, we'll be attaching our wires to a 6-pole end. Some diode kits will have this included. You are going to need this in order to make your attachment point from the 6-pole via the umbilical to the 7-pole. So sometimes your tow bar will actually come with this. So that's something to look for when piecing together a flat tow set for your vehicle. If you need to pick up just the 6-pole, we have these also available here at eTrailer. So at this point, we're not going to be using the 4-pole end. So I'm going to just cut these ends off here. And having that little bit of extra here to kind of feed through is going to make it easier for us. We can always tie the extra back. We also have our charge line here, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this back. And then we'll take the boot from our 6-pole and slide this up. And then we're going to feed that through the hole here on our 6-pole mounting. And I'm going to strip back all of our wires. You don't have to strip them back too far. The terminals that they go into in the 6-pole, they're not super deep, so just about that much should be enough. Now there's letters embossed on most 6-poles, and that's going to show you exactly where they go. This tall one here is going to be for our charge line, so I'll show you how to hook this up, and then I'll go through and show you exactly where they all go. Now this one has a small Phillips head screw. You're going to back it out enough to open it up to get your wire in. Don't take the screw completely out. These are very hard to find and also get back in place. So you'll just slide your wires in, make sure you don't have any loose ones hanging out, and then when you tighten it down, you don't have to get too crazy. You just want it snug. You don't want to damage the wires. It should be able to support itself. So I'll go ahead and I'll get our diode wiring attached onto the 6-pole, and I'll show you exactly where they go. So I've gone ahead and attached my wires. So at the 12 o'clock position, you're going to see TM, that's our tail marker, or our running light, which is going to be our brown wire. Next we have GD for ground, so that's our white wire. LT is going to be left turn signal, so that's yellow. RT is going to be our right turn signal, so that'll be our green wire. So something that we always do here that helps protect the plug, this does live on the front of the vehicle, so anything as far as weather, it's going to see it. So using a little RTV silicone kind of go through and fill the terminals to where, you know, this is going to make sure that water doesn't get in here and break down our connections. You can also backfeed or backfill this once you have the boot on. It's kind of up to you, but this will at least protect this long term and just make sure that our wires stand up for the lifespan of the flat toe career of your vehicle. Now we'll feed this in, slide our boot on, and then just kind of further going along with that waterproofing, what I'm going to do is get some electrical tape and wrap it around where the boot slides onto the plug. It's also a good time, there's wire loom that's included in the kit. You can tuck that into the boot and tape that up as well, and that's just going to kind of seal it up and make sure that it looks nice and clean on the front of our vehicle. So with everything attached, we'll go ahead and get this mounted up to our bracket, and then we need to test to make sure that it works before hitting the road. Best way to do this, we have a test box here that we're using, but it's just simulating hooking up to your RV. So you're going to take your umbilical, plug it into the 6-pole and then the 7-pole on your RV and run through the light sequence. You might need someone to check the lights as you do it, but make sure that your running lights, turn signals, and brake lights are all working properly. So now we'll run through our light sequence on our vehicle, starting with the running lights. Next we'll do our left turn signal, our right turn signal, and then finally our brakes. So now at this point, we know that our diodes are working. All that's left to do is get the rest of your flat toe components set up, get your fascia put back on, and just kind of aligning the top tabs here, you know, to kind of get it all centered up. Just kind of putting this here. You can loosely put some hardware in if you want to hold that in place, but this pretty much gives us an idea of where we're cutting out. Now granted, it's not pulled back all the way, so it will kind of draw in a little bit, but you can start to see where we're going to need to trim out on both sides. So I always take a chalk marker or a paint marker and just kind of mark it out. That way you can get a reference point, and then you can go back, take the fascia off, trim it, and then mock it back up just to make sure you get that nice clean fit. And once you have everything working properly, fascia should slide back on, and then we'll just attach everything in the reverse order that we took it off. Make sure you get your wiper or your windshield washer squirter put back in, as well as that plug that we unplugged from the bumper. So I've gone ahead and got everything put back together in the reverse order, and this is kind of how it's going to look. So when I trimmed it out, I tried my best to leave as much grill as possible, but it really didn't work out just with the way that the components are mounted here. But this entire top here can stay. I did just kind of cut out this section for our arms and safety chain loops, and again, just here because of our bracket, I wanted it nice and open and able to be used easily. So overall, pretty clean look. It keeps everything pretty tidy up front. But overall, once you get everything back, you're ready to hook your vehicle up, get all your components set up, and hit the road. And that was a look and installation of the Roadmaster Diode wiring on a 2018 Ford Explorer.